Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to episode 91 of the Heartily Millennial podcast, where we are young, dumb, and full of
l'opinion.
Oh, l'opinion. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, that is Justin with me today. No Matthew.
Hello.
You just get Justin and Adam today. And, well, I'm going to give just a bit of, what's the word? Warning for today's podcast.
Trigger warning is what they call it now.
Trigger warning.
Trigger warning.
Specifically for any family out there of Justin and I who might be listening. This might not be a podcast you want to tune in on, because we are going to talk about something we feel is important.
Masturbation.
Yes, we are.
Masturbation.
We are talking about masturbation today.
Well, at least for part of today. I don't know if masturbation's an hour, but
yeah, touche. But yeah, just, disclosure there. But anyways, but I agree with you. You were saying before the podcast that it's something that's important to discuss, and not many people discuss it.
Yes, because not a lot of people discuss it. There's not a lot of dialogue on whether or not it's good or bad, outside of a religious sense. And there's actually not a whole lot of information out there on whether or not it's actually good for the psyche, or if any activity at all in that way is good for you, or if it's just an overabundance. I mean, the age you should be healthily starting at, the amount that you should be doing it. I mean, there's a lot of aspects that go into this. And I wouldn't say that you and I are like experts on the psychological aspect of it, but we're definitely not strangers to it.
No, you and I definitely went into we kind of had like a saga where we were really into health, and once we
we will again.
Right, we will again. But once but I felt like the reason why that kind of came about with us is because we were at a point where we were so healthy in the other aspects of our life, the ones that everybody just tries to get to, right? So in diet, we were exercising, we were really fucking health conscious. I mean, we were food.
We found it very important to enrich our minds. You were painting a lot. I was getting back into just vocal technique and hard work in general, work ethic.
Yes.
Getting up early in the morning. So it really was just kind of the next step is to examine that. Not to mention, I feel like, we'll touch upon all these things individually, but I feel like a lot of young men start to notice different effects, with their bodies in the bedroom, when they're intimate with another person. And, I think we'll touch on all of that, but I feel like it's very important, and I feel like someone's got to do it. So why don't we do it?
Yeah, I agree with you. And, like I said, I think it is something very important to talk about, especially because, the extension of this conversation is porn, right?
Right.
And there's kind of this, there's this one thing that people do talk about is they talk about people who have addiction to porn, right?
Right.
But people don't really understand that addiction to porn really just means addicted to masturbating.
Right.
They go hand in hand with
it's
each
a
other.
release.
Yes.
And it's really, it's about the release, and it's about the components that go into one stimulating yourself so that you may have a release. The way that you technically like do it. Right. And then, really your attitude toward it. Those three components are what formulate a problem or a habit or anything like that. So let's first start at the stigma of it all. Everyone kind of discovers that on their own. And everyone usually discovers something like that in secret.
Yes.
So it starts with a little bit of like a stigma, right? Like a shame.
Yeah, well,
to it.
And a stereotype also, because it's not really a stereotype, because I would argue that it's true that all men watch porn, a lot of women too.
I think it starts before that, because you don't understand that. For example, I'm older than you are. I'm still in the millennial spectrum technically, right?
Right.
But we didn't have pornography or internet in general readily available to us at a young age.
Right.
I did not, you know, so.
I mean, it wasn't until I was like, I would say 15, 16 when internet porn kind of came into my life.
And I was already almost graduated college.
Yeah, I feel
when the streaming aspect.
Right, I
understand. The free streaming aspect.
Yeah.
So, with that said, I mean, sorry, Mom and Dad, if you're listening to this, or anybody who cares.
That's why I had to give that disclosure at the beginning.
For me, I mean, it was all about exploration. I didn't know that I had the intention of masturbating or that I had this desire to have a release.
Right.
It was curiosity, you know? So, I mean, as a gay man, you know, you don't know that you're gay for a while. Mm-hmm. And then in retrospect, you realize that you were gay the whole time. But for me, it started with looking up keywords. Right. I remember being at the library and I typed in sex.com because everything ended with .com. It popped up. I was in public. It made me feel some kind of way. I immediately exited out of it and I went outside because I didn't know like what was going on.
Like what the fuck was that?
Yeah, like why did I feel this rush of heat to my face? I remember it like it was yesterday. So to me, that was a safer place to look for that because one, I had this feeling that, you know, I pay to be there, so I should be able to. But two, it was like if I did it at home, I'd have to have some kind of cover up for it. So then I started getting more daring. I was a lot more interested, and I would try to see this kind of thing at home. My parents were on vacation. I went on a field day. I didn't touch myself for anything. I was just trying to acquire information. To be quite honest, I did not know how to. It didn't. It wasn't something for me that I just somehow knew how to do.
Right.
And I remember any letter I type in after like 3 days of my parents being gone, and I had not masturbated this whole time ever, would bring up a porn site like www.a, like ass raped bitches, or www.b.
I remember that for sure.
You know, buttholefucking.com.
Yeah, it was always sentences.
You know,
very specific sentences.
Exactly.
Very detailed.
So that is when I desired some kind of release. And a website took a million years to load. So if they had a white background, it was much faster. But of course, all porn has a black background. So it was like, enter, let the fucker load, go get, you know, a Mountain Dew or whatever. And, you know, maybe, you know, make sure you've done your homework, whatever. Look back and you can see like the outline of the windows popping up. That always meant it was about to show up. The text would then come and the pictures were last.
Yes.
So anyhow, yeah, it's secret, right? It's shame. You don't tell anybody about this. So take it away from there. I feel like we're going to advance on this.
Yeah,
slowly.
well, so my experiences, so like when I actually first masturbated, it was like by accident. You know, like I wasn't like quite sure what was happening. It was really just kind of like rubbing up against, you know, like I think it was like my bed or something, right? And just realizing it felt good. And then, you know, the next logical step is like, oh, well, I can just do this with my hand, you know, and it kind of took off from there. And as far as like internet porn and everything goes, I remember I never had any like way of accessing it in any way, shape, or form when I was like younger. I think one time I went to a friend's house and I like looked under their sink and there was like a Playboy in there, and I think that was like my first experience actually like watching porn or anything. But it's funny you were bringing up the things of like waiting for the screens to load and stuff, because I do remember as I got older, like I said, like 15, 16 age realm. And just as you know, there were a lot of sites that were just like that, were like sentences or whatnot. What I ended up finding were sites that had pictures, and then the pictures would take you to another site, right? So I would find one of these sites that had those pictures, and sometimes the pictures would take me to like that girl's like website, you know. So it'd be like, you know, like Tiffany Allison at, whatever.com. And then you would wait for the screen to load, and then there would be like a 20-second trailer at the beginning that just showed little snippets, a free one. And you had to and even once the screen loaded, you had to wait, like, at least in my case, it was like you'd have to wait 30 minutes, to 40 minutes for that fucking video to load.
Oh, dial up.
So you're literally waiting to masturbate. But the reason why I brought up how the porn and the masturbating goes hand in hand, and going with like why you say there's like a stigma on it, and what I was talking about with like stereotype, is just it's not something that I feel like is talked about and I think young boys look as shameful because it's not something there's a lot of information about. When you start doing it, you don't really talk about doing it, and
right.
It's not until you get a little older and somebody maybe makes a comment and it makes you feel a little more comfortable to also make a comment back, and before you know it, everyone's talking about it. But there's that stereotype that just all men watch porn, and because of the kind of man stereotype, it's like, I don't know how to explain it, but it's just like, it's not something that's talked about because it's just like, oh, that's just something that men do. And it's just dismissed as that, I guess, is what I'm trying to say.
Which kind of takes a little bit of the edge off the shame when you realize that other men are doing this.
As you get older, definitely.
It starts to do that. I mean, but it's still not something that you are willing to talk to about, like with your parents or anything like that. That's really weird. Did you ever discuss masturbation with your parents?
No, never.
Me neither.
In fact, I would argue that I was more shameful of it growing up was because, and not that my parents were ever like, telling me like, don't ever do this, it's wrong. The conversation masturbation just never came up. But I think living in like a Catholic household, and that was kind of, the umbrella thing for a Catholic is you just don't do that.
Right.
So I would feel
any religion,
really guilty in the beginning for sure doing it. And then
for a lot of religions, it really falls under the adultery.
Yeah.
Because you're fantasizing about somebody's wife who is not yours.
Right. Exactly.
So, anyhow, as you mature and you get into a place of where this becomes, normal, it starts to become habitual, right? And everyone understands that you need to take your time to masturbate. It's very important. It's like having your coffee.
Right.
It's just part of your day. But where it really starts to become problematic is when it's not just taking the edge off anymore.
It's become a replacement.
Absolutely. It starts to replace any effort that you would put forth to have an interpersonal like experience with somebody. And the thing is, searching for that interpersonal experience is really important. It's like the game is very important to learn how to play. Getting sex, that's what helps you decide that you want to improve yourself. If people aren't having sex with you, but they're having sex with other people, that's an opportunity for you to really learn how to take a social cue. So say you look around, you see that all the other guys that are having sex, chances are you're not, naked around them or anything like that, but you can tell that they have a nice physique or whatever. And then you think, all right, well, if they're having sex because they have a nice physique, I'll masturbate in the meantime, but I'm going to go ahead and have, this motivation to improve my body. But when you don't have the motivation to improve your body, you just want to masturbate. In the meantime, there is no more motivation. You're taking the motivation away by just giving yourself the end result. So I think that's where the problem really starts. And then there's a slew of problems that really fall after that.
Yes. Well, and I very much agree with you that it's a dangerous thing when it takes place of that motivation for an interpersonal relationship with somebody. Right. Or an intimate relationship more so. And speaking from experience, and this is funny because, this was something I claimed for years. Now, when I first met Justin, now Justin in general just has a higher libido than I do. Would you argue against that?
I would not argue against that.
So, but this was something I always claimed for years, because for years sex was just never really like a big deal to go out there and try to find or to try
You welcomed
to get,
it if
right?
it fell in your lap.
Exactly.
Which,
but
by the way, it fell in his lap a lot.
Yeah, it did often. But I was never like out there in bars trying to pick up girls or what have you, you know, and I would have these long periods of time without having sex at all, and it never really bothered me.
And I did not understand.
Yes,
I thought
Justin-
he was superhuman or something.
Mm-hmm. So now this was for years, right, guys? Now, fast forward years later, I found myself, you know, almost pursuing sex, not because it was something I was like, oh, I need to have sex, but just because it was like, it's been a while. I should probably get on the board again, and then I'll be good for a while. That's almost what it felt like, you know? So the motivation kind of came back in those instances.
Question, don't forget your point, but question, did you find that as you decided I should probably get on the board again, was the standard of women a little bit lower just to get on the board? Okay.
For sure.
Okay.
Yeah. And there was still a certain amount of work I was only willing to put in. So I just knew like lower on the board. That sounds really bad, but I mean, that's what the case was.
We're here to be honest, not to make people happy.
And, so anyways, I found now later in life when I was going through that and trying to find somebody that I had this issue of I wasn't able to get it up, right? First time this had happened to me at this point. So the first time it happens, you know, when it comes to those kind of situations, I know how to, you know, handle the situations. And it was really just like I don't know what's up. Like, this is just the case.
Sorry,
you know?
It's not you, it's me.
Yeah, exactly. You know, what more can you say? And I knew just from talking to, you know, friends and other men, like I knew this was something that happens sometimes in men's life.
Of course.
It just does. So
hashtag me too if you ever had an erectile dysfunction.
So this was just one of those times. So, but then there came another time, and now I had the same issue. And so now the second time, you know, especially in a row, you're like, okay.
That's a trend.
You know, that's a trend. Yeah. So trend continued. And so I was just beside myself. I had no fucking clue what was going on. I didn't know why I was having this issue at this age, you know, whatever it was. And I started to obviously look up a lot of information about it, of what could possibly cause this kind of stuff. Is it just a mind block, something physical? What is it? And I came across a lot of YouTube videos and eventually a TED Talks of this gentleman who he gave this TED Talks about how he was somebody who was addicted to porn and in turn, you know, masturbation. But he did speak about them separately, and he was talking about how porn, you know, sets up your expectations. It makes your,
don't paraphrase this, because there's a lot to this.
Okay.
To unfold. So start one at a time and then we'll hit it.
Okay. So
expectation. Let's talk about why it raises your expectation.
So obviously when you're watching porn, these girls in these porns are made to look extraordinarily beautiful, you know,
but like in the dirtiest, most sexy, gross, cummy kind of way that you want.
Yeah, exactly. You know, there's definitely a way that all the porn, you know, girls in porn.
And on the flip side, if you're watching gay porn, there's no normal looking man. They're always hung like rhinoceroses. They always have beautifully built giant chests, hairless bodies, perfect asses.
Right.
I mean, so on the same line.
And aside from just the way that the participants look in the porn, it's the way that the porn plays out. You know, it starts with this foreplay with the girl really moaning and getting into it. I'm assuming the same thing with gay porn.
Yes, and everyone's just starving for the penis.
Everyone's, just thirsty for it, right? You know, and then, you know, usually it starts with a blowjob or 69, whatever, and then it leads into sex. But then you'll have like this 20-minute sex scene. scene, right?
Right.
So doing different positions, different ways, different parts of the house sometimes, and the girl's usually behaving in a certain way during these acts, and the man's usually behaving a certain way
and
during
everything
these acts.
flows really well. There's like
Yes.
no communication needed. It just, for whatever reason, looks like this is just how it happens.
Exactly. So if you watch porn all the time, you start to become desensitized to this kind of stuff. And you start to think, oh, this is how porn really, or this is how sex really is. And what's more so, at least in my case, even subconsciously, you sit there and say, well, like, so when I'm having sex in real life, this is how a girl wants me to behave.
Right.
And when you find yourself in those situations, it really disconnects you from the moment because you're just focusing on how to do it like the people in porn, whether you know you're doing it or not. So that's the expectation bit.
And also you're expecting them to like scream and all of this
yeah, well,
too.
that's what I
And
meant by like how they behave.
And that's
sure.
where you're looking for your validation. So if they're not screaming and if they're not moaning and if they're not quivering and shit,
Thank God there's something wrong with me.
well, yeah, exactly.
Yes.
Which adds to the dysfunction sometimes.
Yes, for sure. You get stuck inside your head. That's definitely what was doing it for me. And so another thing he brought up about porn was the attention span. When
Right.
we watch porn, if a video's 10 minutes long, you're not watching 10 minutes. You're jumping through to find your favorite parts.
And sadly enough, I mean, there's nothing wrong with this either, but sex does not last 45 minutes.
No.
I mean, from the beginning, middle, and end, if you go a few times, you might get a couple hours out of it with a little bit of rest time.
Right.
But, I mean, you can have some great sex in 5 minutes.
Yes.
Like really good, fulfilling
Absolutely,
sex.
for sure. Yeah.
So, but in porn, it
doesn't work
it's
that
not
way,
5
yeah.
minutes.
Exactly. They're actors. They're performing for the camera. But so he was talking about, so not only is it that you click through the different videos, but through the timeline in the video,
right?
But you also click around to different videos very quickly,
right?
So you're constantly jumping from this one. Okay, I'm done with that one. This one, done with that one. This one. So your attention span is just.
Not only that, but you're not going from a buff dude and a blonde and watching like 6 videos of a buff dude and a blonde.
Right.
It's a buff dude and a blonde. Mm-hmm. And then it's one of every hair color in a dude. And then it's 2 guys and a girl. And then it's whatever. So you don't really have even one fantasy to stick to. You want all the fantasies.
And that brings me to my third point. And the third thing that this guy spoke of was just you not only get desensitized to how sex really is, but you actually get desensitized to sex itself. Because when you start watching porn a lot, just as you said, first you're watching just the typical porn, just a man fucking a woman, or in your case, a man fucking a man, nothing crazy, nothing special. But if you're watching porn so much, eventually those videos just aren't doing it for you anymore.
Yes.
So now all of a sudden you're looking at like different fetishes and this, that, the other thing, BDSM, choking, whatever it is, you're going through the different fetishes to try to find what's going to give you your fix at that point. And at least for me, what it ended up doing to me in the during this whole bit is giving me myself false expectations of what I was into.
Right.
Because all I had was like, well, I usually watch this porn, so I must be into this. But really, I was just desensitized to all the other shit.
Right.
That I was just on this fix right now. So it really fucks up your sex life. And so this was, so then the TED Talks guy went and was talking about masturbating separately, and was just talking about how wasn't much to say as far as the points that I made on porn, but just what I said in the beginning to where they go hand in hand. So it was after watching this TED Talk video where all of a sudden I realized, I was like, holy fuck. I think I'm one of these people. I think I have an issue because at the time I was, living, with you in an apartment and I worked from home, and I only worked, maybe on like Mondays and one other day in the week. And I just had free time, the rest of the week. And I didn't realize that to fill that time, a lot of the times I was just masturbating and I was just watching porn and masturbating. And a number that I used to be proud of how much I masturbated every day, quickly became like shameful because, oh, fuck, I have a fucking issue.
Right.
Know?
No, I totally get that. I think there's a lot of people out there that they have that number that they really like, and you can only go a certain amount of years before that's something that you're legitimately proud of.
Right.
And then eventually everyone else is looking at you like, I like legitimately just do not have that much time in my day. And if there's one thing you don't want to have a ton of time for, it's just to masturbate all day.
Yeah.
Especially since, like, really, I guess what you're into is what you're into, but sex in general, whether it's video or in real life, it's not really a spectator sport.
No.
You know, it's an interpersonal experience.
Right.
It's something that you do with someone else. So when you're used to it being a spectator sport, it's hard to have your mind in the game when, you know what I mean? Like, other than porn, sex is not about watching your dick go in and out.
Right.
Sex is about
connecting with the person
with
you're
someone,
with.
looking at them and becoming, in a way, like, not to be cheesy, but like a part of them for that moment in time.
I agree with you.
You know, and then eventually, I mean, you're just trying to smash two bodies together to make them one body.
Yeah.
And on accident, you know, and
Right.
inside, and then it's over. And then you try again to become one body with another person or the same person again.
Right.
So it takes sex from being interpersonal to being a spectator sport. So once you're, you know, just because you watch, you know, baseball, you know, everybody's sports, doesn't mean when they throw you in there that you're going to be able to hit the ball and run the, you know what I mean? One, you have to be in shape. Well, sex too.
Yeah.
I mean, no doubt about it. You know, it's hard to have sex
if you want to have fun, for sure.
Yeah,
you know?
Exactly. So then, I mean, everything needs to be exercised. Your game needs to be exercised.
Yes.
When you've just been jerking off all the time, and then you do decide, you know, I would like to have an interpersonal experience.
Yeah.
One, getting sex is hard.
Yes.
Two, that juggling of, is it worth it? Because I could just go masturbate. That's going to be kind of in your mind, you know, whether or not I want to even do this. And then you work hard to put yourself in an interpersonal connection that you're not ready for. And then you get discouraged because you can't perform.
Yes.
And whether or not we like it, this all starts with wanting to masturbate all the time.
Yes.
And I'm not knocking masturbation. There's actually quite a few studies out there that show that a regular release in order to get things going and working and everything is actually good for you. That's why you have nocturnal emissions or wet dreams or whatever once every how often.
Right.
You know, but you need to exercise.
Yes, I agree. And the point with this conversation too, though, is that, you know, though it's healthy, it can become a problem. And I found myself in the situation kind of where when you're with a bunch of guys and you're talking about stuff like this, and people would be like, you know, yeah, I'll do it a solid, you know, like I'll do it like every morning, or, you know, oh yeah, I do it when I'm in the shower, you know, like I usually do in the morning and then before I go to bed. And I'm sitting here like, fucking amateurs. I got you out like 6 or 7 a fucking day, bitches. Like,
and everyone laughs.
And everyone laughs. Yeah, exactly.
And you're like, nah, like really.
And it started once I watched this video, dude. I started to notice those, because I didn't stop once I started this video. It was just like the kind of wake up call of like,
yeah,
oh, okay,
the
this
light
has
bulb
to get
turned
done.
on.
Yeah. But skipping forward, so I decided to go a period of time.
And in solidarity, I too decided.
Yes, and Justin did it also. And so the whole thing, how long was it that we agreed on? Was it 90 days? We were trying to hit 90 days,
decided to
right?
start with 90 days. The ground rules were only interpersonal connections were allowed.
Yes, so no porn, no masturbation.
Right.
Period. If you were getting some, it had to be from somebody else.
Right.
So we quit this, and Let me tell you guys, I was somebody who I thought I just had a low libido. Sex just was just not a thing for me. And because I probably have never missed probably 1 or 2 days of my life since I started, and all the fucking sudden within like because there's like an adjustment period for sure. So, but like after like a week or two, boy, did that libido come back in full fucking throttle.
That was a rough time.
What killed me was, and one thing I never understood with like Justin, who has a higher libido anyway, was there would be, or even not even just you, other friends also, is there would be these periods of time where like I would get these comments of just like, oh, I just, I need to get fucked, or I need to fuck something, or or I need to, have sex with a girl, whatever it was. And I just never understood that like urge,
Right.
And now all of a sudden I found myself where it's like, oh my God, sex has literally just been on my mind all day. Like not porn, sex.
And it didn't feel unhealthy.
It didn't feel unhealthy, no, but it was different for me. It wasn't something I had experienced that crazy for a very long time. And I was like, wow, like I must have had a fucking issue.
Mm-hmm.
And, but that's why I think it's important to talk about, because since kind of going through this experience and talking to others about it, I would start, friends would start opening up to me and being like, yeah, there was this one time where like, and the thing is, this would be somebody who I've talked about masturbating with many times. But once that ice was broken of
talk about masturbating, not masturbating with them.
Yes.
Okay, yes.
just to be clear. But... And all of a sudden, I'd mentioned these issues and the ice breaks, and all of a sudden they're talking to me about similar things that they had, in the past.
Mm-hmm.
And the thing is that I don't think anybody talks about it because it's been such a demonized thing to talk about.
Well, by the time you're ready to talk about it, it's turned into one, all guys do it.
Right.
So there's no need at this point to actually demonize any part of it.
Right.
Two, if you do decide that there's something wrong with it, it's kind of backwards from when you were a kid. Now you're worried about being ostracized. Now you're worried about being that guy that says it's not good for you and then being told, what the fuck is your problem? You know? You always want to fit in. But I feel like when we were deciding not to do that anymore and we'd explain it to people, it was like, well, more power to you.
Yeah. Like everybody was just kind of like, okay. But I think it was a secretly kind of like, oh, I wish I could do that. You know what I mean? But I don't know. It's just something that I think especially men out there just have to be like weary of, when you're watching porn and everything, because
whenever you do anything, you should really look into what the long-term effects are going to be.
Right.
So with like, say, drug use, for example, there's a tremendous amount of information about what extensive drug use or prolonged drug use can do to you.
Right.
You've seen those ads of like, this is what you look like after having one glass of wine every day for 20 years.
Right.
This is what can happen to you. No one seems to want to talk about what happens to your brain when you've masturbated twice a day or once a day for 50 years. And then also, it depends on the kind of lifestyle that you want to lead.
True.
You and I, we've always had this idea that we wanted to be fit people of mind and body, and depending on who you are, soul, right? And you always want to be that person that can be a role model in some way. You want to... Every guy wants to be the one that can get the girl. Every gay man wants to be the one that can get the guy. And you're never going to get that if you're finding a substitution for that. But we don't have studies about the long-term results of this, and they need to have them.
Right. Well, but one thing I would argue that we do have studies with, and the reason why I think everybody should really take these kind of conversations we have seriously, and I'm also talking about the conversation we had about weed yesterday, is because the things we do have studies for is that your brain constantly wants a shot of dopamine.
Yes.
Constantly wants a shot of it. And what we've learned, especially with diet, is your body always wants to take the easy way out.
Oh, absolutely.
Constantly. It just wants to
and
get
your brain
there.
does too.
Yeah, it wants to get there the easiest way possible. That's why people get addicted to smoking. That's why people get addicted to smoking weed. That's why people get addicted to porn and masturbation, because it's a dopamine release. And what we were talking about with like weed yesterday is when you're constantly getting that dopamine release, it doesn't make you want to be productive, because being productive was going to give you that, but now you no longer need that. And masturbation's the same way. When you release, it releases not only dopamine but serotonin into your brain, that gives you this euphoric feeling. And when you can get that by yourself, well, that's your brain's easiest way to get that, so that's the way it's going to constantly go to. But if you don't have it, your brain's still going to crave it.
And an orgasm, I mean, that's the number one reinforcer in life.
True.
It's the thing that makes us want to reproduce. The orgasm is what determines whether or not we get to continue on surviving.
Right.
It gives it gives a reward for reproducing.
Yes.
So if you're taking the easy way to get the most satisfying thing in life all the time, I mean, you don't have a whole lot to look forward to. And eventually you do want to be, well, most people, I didn't think I did, but you do want to be with someone, and you want to be with someone you can have sex with a lot. And when you are presenting yourself as somebody who has given themselves a lot of orgasms, and let's face it, a man especially can give themselves pretty good orgasms. You're giving yourself a lot of pressure.
Yeah.
You're giving yourself just the way you like it.
Yeah, exactly.
So the ability for anyone else to do that for you, you've robbed them of it. I mean, I'm sure most of us, have that first sexual encounter, and you recall the feeling you got when you first were going to, climax or whatever. It's unlike anything else, and it happens pretty fast.
Yes.
And even though it's embarrassing, it's a great thing. You are responding so strongly to the touch of somebody else, to an interpersonal experience.
Right.
And you're just robbing your future partner of that. And I'm not religious. I'm not looking at this like save it for whoever. But, I mean, wouldn't you feel slightly, unnerved or defeated if only your girlfriend could please herself, if you couldn't do it for her?
Oh yeah. I mean, for sure. I've had girlfriends in the past that have, at least I feel have always been, particularly honest with me about those things, because I have been told by this from girls also who, I haven't slept with, just talking generally, because a lot of girls will say that a lot of times they won't climax, right? But that doesn't mean they don't enjoy the sex,
right?
But they won't climax. But yeah, I mean, I guess that's an interesting question though, is that something that, not to kind of go off topic, but is that something a man should feel bad about if he can't be the one to bring her to climax and only she can do it? I mean, the sex can still be good, through the other aspects of it.
Yeah, you don't have to climax every time, but it's more, to me, it's more along the lines of, why can't you? Because let's face it, sexual compatibility is very important.
Yes.
Okay, sex life or intimacy in general in a relationship is incredibly important. It's one of the three main pillars. What is it? It's intimacy, passion, and commitment.
Yes.
Okay, you need all three for long term. So if you just aren't compatible or can't figure out how to be compatible sexually, inevitably it's gonna fail.
Yeah, I'd agree.
Okay,
for sure.
So if the reason you can't do that is because you've been pleasing yourself for so long, that's extra shitty.
That's a slap in your own fucking face.
Exactly. And in the face of your partner. And now it's your doing that is causing the failure of each other's sex lives. And that's just really sad. It's very, very unfortunate. And then back to the whether or not you have to climax every time. I can tell you from a gay man's perspective, I don't like climaxing every time.
Really?
Yeah, I don't.
Why is that?
Because when you climax, it's over. It's just over.
Right.
You know, a lot, depending on who you are, but for most people. And I don't always want it to be over after one time. You know, I want to still have that desire and that longing for more. I want to be the one that keeps it going, you know, and so that's how I am, you know, without going into too much detail. That's not necessarily what he's like.
Right. I feel you.
Okay. But for me, I don't necessarily need to do that. So I feel like with women a lot of the time, and
You think it's similar?
I know it is because I work
yeah.
in a environment with lots of women, and while we do not talk about these things at work, inevitably we're going to talk about these things outside of work.
Okay.
And I mean, I know several women who've never actually had a full-blown, you know, orgasm, but they're still really, really into being intimate. They get different things out of it, and they've told me that that's part of our similarity is they don't need to have a mind-blowing orgasm because when it's over, they still have this really strong want. And they love having the want.
Right.
They love having the, you know, looking at their partner and just think, dang, this is mine. I get more of this. And, you know, everyone's different. But I feel like this is also a matter of communicating, because we've all heard that communication is important, but I don't think that a lot of people understand how obvious communication is. It's literally talking about everything. Recap your sex life. Talk about what you like. Talk about what you could have done differently. Talk about what you noticed.
So I agree with you on the communication aspect, but to go even further into that point, I think communication also happens in other ways. So a perfect example of this is going back to what you were saying, to where the conversations you've had with, you know, fellow female friends in the past about this subject, is that even though they may have never climaxed like that, they get other things out of it, you know, of being intimate with that person.
Yeah.
You know, whereas if you're a man and you're just watching porn all day, and this goes with the false expectations, and you're not getting out there and, for lack of a better term, sleeping around and kind of learning this about women, you know, and understanding that there are other things that they want, there are other things they, you know, long for aside from this kind of stuff, it's going to make you a better lover in the long run also.
Oh, absolutely.
So when people are so, you know, and I'm not even saying being as, because I'm sure there's people listening going, well, I don't do it as much as Adam did, but I just doing it all the time in general, though, even if it's just once a day.
If it's a substitution for real personal interaction, when it
then
becomes,
you gotta chill out.
Yeah, when it truly becomes that. And addiction to masturbation and addiction to porn, even though they can be together, are two separate things. Addiction to masturbation is when you have to masturbate in order to go on with your day and have a productive day. Okay, if you're fixated on the fact that you have not come and you do not want to go out and do that, you know, find someone to help you do that,
right?
You know, and it's not worth it to you. Okay, that's addiction to masturbation. To me, addiction to porn is when you can't really seem to climax without pornography. So porn addiction and masturbation addiction are different to me. Would you agree with that, or do you have a different spin on that?
I agree with you. You know, and I wasn't saying you can't have one without the other, but just usually if you're watching, you know, you're not sitting there for hours just, you know, watching porn, not trying to climax. You know what I mean?
Right.
So I was just saying they just go hand in hand. You're typically not watching porn if you're not masturbating or plan to masturbate.
Right.
But for sure, there are plenty of people out there, and I've had my own stages of it, of masturbating without porn. Absolutely.
So what do you think about, I mean, can two people be addicted to porn together?
Like they're watching it together and like masturbating together? That's a good question, because that is like a fetish, isn't it? That is a thing that people do, right? I mean, if it's something that you and your like romantic partner are into together, and it's something you guys do together in some weird roundabout way, I would say that that's still intimate. That's still an interpersonal kind of
I think so too. Because I mean, really, that's a kink is what that is.
Yeah, kink.
You know, and everyone has their own kinks, and kink actually, and we can go into kink if we want to, but kink is a something that two people can actually really share and be really intimate about it, you know?
Right.
I have less interest in masturbation and porn now that that possibility is available to me a lot more.
Yeah, and I think everybody's the same way when
I
they're
think
in a
you get the
relationship.
yah-yahs out a little bit, especially in like the first 6 months of a relationship, you know, and then things kind of start to settle down. But I definitely think it's important for people to actually talk about it. You know, you give up a lot of things when you're in a relationship, and I'm not saying that's in a bad way.
Right.
But I mean, if you're monogamous, which most people are, you give up group sex for the rest of your life.
Yes.
You know, if you've always fantasized about a threesome or something like that, it's over.
Yeah.
Forever. So that's important, I think, for your partner to know. That's always been like a thing of yours, so that they can, you know, you can talk about it, or you can try to make other compromises,
Right.
you know, stuff like that, because monogamy is forever.
Oh, absolutely. Well, I mean, that goes with, you know, the communication thing where, yeah, if you're in a relationship, you know, certainly talk about what, you know, either one of you would want to happen, you know, during an intimate moment.
So what's the strangest kink you've encountered in a woman that you were like, really? I'll tell you mine.
Yeah,
a lot of
tell me
people I think
yours.
have come across this. I came across this back in LA. I had no idea that people like this. And it was piss. I thought it was so odd. It was a morning after situation. We were in the shower, and this person asked me to do that to them. And I mean, now I don't think it's as weird, because afterward I researched this and I learned that
it's a pretty common
very
thing, yeah.
common. I still don't get it.
Yeah, that was one I never got either.
But at the time, I was just so... I mean, you're naked in a shower, right?
Yeah.
So you're exposed, and you're like, you know, what do I do?
Yeah.
What do I do? I'm not going to say what happened either, because that's weird. But I just remember being caught so off guard, because to me, sex was a little intense. You know, you're like naked, and, you know, sometimes you make noises you didn't necessarily thought you were going to make, or
Right.
your body has functions that you don't think happen during sex and whatever. But for someone to take something so, you know, naturally we look at as piss, as gross and weird, and to be into it, I mean, I was just completely caught off guard.
No, I would be caught off guard also. Well, I mean, when I think about it, I don't ever really think I came across any like weird kink of a girl.
Well, I think you have.
You think?
Yes, you had one that really liked to pretend like she was gonna get raped.
Oh yes, okay. That was something that never got acted out though. That's why it never came to mind. But yes, Okay, so yes, I did date a girl who had a rape fantasy and wanted that acted out, and she would bring it up from time to time, and I was pretty I was pretty adamant that that was not something I was willing to do, you know, but it didn't stop her from bringing it up every now and then. But yeah, she did have a rape fantasy.
I actually forgot about that. It wasn't until you said no.
I forgot about it too.
Where I was like, no, I'm pretty sure there was something.
Well, the first thing I thought of was just like actual like sexual experiences I've had, you know. There was no like crazy kinks that like happened during sex for me. But yes, there was a girl I dated who wanted that fantasy played out, which I found was odd and did not make me comfortable to do.
Well, I mean, everyone knows no means no.
Exactly.
And you don't fuck with no means no.
Yes, exactly. And that was the exact reasons I explained to her is like during rape, when rape actually happens, it's usually somebody screaming, no, don't, or stop over and over again, you know? So at what point, you know, does this become a fantasy and then becomes a little too real for one of us? No, that's just was not something I was willing to fuck with at all. Like, and any girl out there who has that fantasy, good luck finding a guy who will play that out for you, I guess. I guess you can do a safe word. I guess that's usually the commonality with those kind of kinks,
I don't know
right?
the way that this country, the world in general, but this country is going. You can give your consent and then change your mind.
Yeah, in some
and
places.
somehow just think that, afterward. If you change your mind afterwards, sex just instantly with a thought turned into rape.
Yeah.
And you were in there, and there's proof that you were in there.
Yeah, it's scary times, and like I said, definitely not a fantasy I'm willing to play out with anyone. I knew somebody who I knew a few people who I actually never had like sex with, but there's a lot of more than not girls out there who are into the choking bit.
Oh, definitely.
Like super, like really into it. Like they want to, almost be on the verge of passing out,
Oh, that's a little extreme. I don't think I have met one person who likes to be right there at the point of passing out.
Yeah. And I feel like that's a pretty common one.
But here's the deal. If it's something that you really want, and then you have somebody else who's really into that, is that healthy? Is this somebody that you should want around, someone who likes choking people out until they're almost going to pass out and then letting them stay alive?
Well, I guess it just depends on the context. In this case, it's the context of sex. So, really, think about it. If you're constantly dating around and you are somebody who's into being choked out during sex, right? And you have this boyfriend over here, and he's great and everything, and the sex is good, but he's not doing that for you. And this guy, this boyfriend, same thing, blah, blah, blah. And then you meet a guy just to hook up, and he's like, I'll fucking choke the shit out of you, and he just chokes you out. Would it not go through your mind that like this is the one, even for a second? I need to keep talking to this guy.
I'm sure it would keep going to the point of like, can we try that again?
Because when we were talking about like the 3 pillars, for example, right? What'd you say they were? Commitment, passion, and
intimacy.
And intimacy, right? Well, I would argue that if you find out you're compatible, during compatible for sex, like super compatible,
that would be
for
passion, and also some point of
intimacy, right? But like that's kind of like the driving force of that relationship, I would argue, wouldn't it be?
Oh, absolutely. But that's a problem with a lot of relationships. They have the passion down. They're pretty good about the intimacy. You can definitely have sex without intimacy,
right?
You could just use someone to come. Okay, which some people are also into that, and I'm not here to shame anybody, but I will not be used for somebody to come.
Right.
But the commitment aspect really does get overlooked.
Yes.
Passion is the animalistic part, that real basic human. Intimacy is where you get, I guess, a lot of the cutesy factor, holding hands, just being close, and so usually there's some intimacy in sex. And since those things are very physical and somewhat psychological, the commitment part is really important. And sometimes the sexes communicate a lot, but we're embarrassed or ashamed that we're not going to be on the same page with the commitment. And that's when things tend to fall apart. And that's why people are afraid to discuss them.
Yeah.
How many times have you had it where you meet somebody, there's sparks fly, you have sex, you meet somebody again, the sparks fly, you have sex, the sex is getting better and better and better, you want to do it more and more often, but you don't know how many people this person's doing it with, and you don't know if you want to ask them because you're afraid they're going to stop having sex with you.
Yes, that is true. Well, why do you think that happens? Or that's the commitment aspect you're saying?
What do you mean? What do you think? What happens?
Like, or not? Why do you think it happens? Why? Or no, I guess that
Like,
is
why
right.
do you?
Like, why do you think we're compelled to know how many people our partner has slept with?
I don't. Well, because I mean, I think that's
Because
a different issue. I think the reason you want to know is because you want to know. I mean, if you're religious, you want to know how dirty spiritually this person is. But I think the reason people really want to know is because they want to know if the experience is different, right? So, I mean, if you've been with 12 women and you're with a girl and you're her second guy or her first guy, you're going to feel a lot more confident. You're going to really try to rock her world. Where if she has been with, 10 times as many people as you have.
Right, you're going to feel a little less
Exactly. So that's why you want to know that. And it's one of those things you really don't want to know.
Yeah, but it's definitely something that always comes across your mind, for sure.
But I think most of us are a lot more confident that we can be good sex partners. And we're worried that we're not going to be adequate lovers or people in committed relationships. So I think that's when people don't want to discuss it. I mean, let's take religious people, for example. They don't oftentimes want to discuss having sex because they never had it. It's not where they are confident. But they've been practicing their entire lives to be a good housewife. They got the cooking down, the cleaning down, the taking care of babies down, okay, the standing by your man, making a house a home. Right. And those are the things that they want to talk about, and which is why they're very compatible with other religious people because they are going into a state of vulnerability together when they first go to have sex. Whereas if you're coming into a relationship and everyone's very experienced and very confident in that way, but you're not particularly confident in the commitment, you tend to not want to go to the commitment. It's not reinforcing, You've, the not the parable, but it's like when someone goes to take piano lessons and they go in there and they have a knack for it and, as opposed to the person going in there thinking they're going to play rock and roll tunes on the piano and they're learning their finger number 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, and counting and conducting and shit like that. Like, fuck this piano bullshit. I thought I was going to be playing, Elton John by week 3. I'm not even on 2 hands yet. Fuck this. So with relationships, I think that's what it is. Why talk about being together when we can just, F each other all the time?
So since we're talking about relationships, just a question to kind of close us up here. So do you think then it is important to constantly be dating somebody until you find the person whom you want to spend the rest of your life with?
Why you gotta ask me this? You know the answer. You know what I'm gonna say to this, don't you?
Well, I guess I'm asking you from an objective standpoint. If you think that's
it's important
something
for dating to be your last thing you're looking for, but I do think it's important to date somebody before you commit to them. Right. So no, I do not think that you should look for someone to date all the time.
Well, and I knew that was going to be your answer, but that's also kind of the reason I asked, because if we're talking about, we were using like the analogy earlier about, the playing the piano, and some people have a knack for it, some people don't. Some people just need more practice. Well, just as you were saying for like the commitment part and for the, really any part of the pillar or any aspect of a relationship, to get better at it, couldn't you argue that in order to do so, you have to date around more and date more people and have more relationships?
The end result is the most gratifying thing to the human psyche and the human body, the orgasm. So everybody wants to have an orgasm, and that is a driving force behind making something spark or making something work when you meet somebody. Really, you want to have sex. You want to have good sex. That is why you are with somebody, okay? You want all the other stuff too, but it really comes down to you want to be with someone and reproduce with them, and you want the reproduction to be really great. Okay, and so no.
So you think most people kind of confuse the two things. Where like
I
they'll
think
find
it's a
somebody
healthy
who,
confusion.
but in the case of like, oh well, you found somebody who you're super compatible with in the bedroom, and then they jump into a relationship with that person because of it, even though the relationship.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. People have different purposes in your life. And I truly do believe that some people's purpose is for you to have sex with.
Okay. Interesting.
I do feel that. I feel that sex is not something reserved for only one person. I think that sex is something that you need to get familiar with. I think that your sexual being is someone that you need to be in touch with, because I think it's very different than your non-sexual being, your persona at work,
Right.
how you are perceived by the public.
Uh-huh.
Okay. And you need to be comfortable with your sexual being, who you are in bed. So yeah, I think it's good to have some people that you have a casual sexual experience with, and that's what you're contributing to each other's life. It's just like some people are your friends.
Right.
Some people they're there to help you learn camaraderie. And we need, in my opinion, we need to not stigmatize what people choose to do with their sex lives. That includes being a virgin, because you are compatible with another person who's decided they're going to be a virgin until they're married. There is a compatibility there.
True. Yeah. Interesting. You said a lot of things that I didn't think about that way before, but I do very much agree with you. Well, I think that's a good place to end this. We are at our hour for the day, and that was a really good conversation. I'm really happy we had that.
Me too.
Actually, I think that's, like you said, I think it's something very important to discuss, relate, not only just the masturbation, but just relationships on a more intimate level like that. And I hope anybody listening was able to take something away from that. And if you are related to me and you got through all of this, bravo. You know a little bit more about Adam now.
And if you're related to me and got through all of this, please never talk to me about this. Thank you. I do not want to discuss this with you. Lead your own lives. I appreciate your support, but I don't want to talk about this. It's weird.
You know what? I second that notion. Yeah.
Gotta feel supported.
gotta feel
solidarity,
supported.
Adam.
Solidarity, man. All right, guys. Thank you so much for listening to today's podcast. Remember, you can find us on all the social media platforms, and we also have a Patreon you can donate money to if you'd like. That's www.patreon.com/hardlymillennial. And any final thoughts, Justin?
Go out there, meet people, have sex, be compatible.
Be compatible, ladies and gentlemen. All right, guys, until tomorrow, have a lovely morning, afternoon, and or evening. Bye-bye.